Hi there, welcome back to our credit and debt management revision sessions. In this session, we're going to be having a walkthrough slash work through of task 2. Now, in terms of what you're expected to do in task 2, it is another computer marked task, and it's essentially going to revolve around assessing credit control, looking at different ratios. Should we grant credit? What observations can we make? So lots of calculation based work and lots of information to work through. But quite a good question. A lot of marks available in these types of tasks. So once you get comfortable with the ratios, understanding A, how to calculate them, and B, being able to interpret them, there's some really nice marks that can set you up really, really nicely for the remaining 4 tasks in this assessment. So let's have a look at this one. We're told that you work as a credit control manager in a company which uses a credit rating system to assess the credit status of its new customers. The credit rating slash scoring system that we can see below is used to assess the risk of default by calculating key indicators, those ratios, comparing them to the table and calculating an aggregate score. Now, I'm not going to run through this whole table. As you are likely watching this on a recording, you can just pause the video and look at the figures yourself. All it's basically showing is, depending on what returns we get on the ratios, we then grant a relevant score for each one, and then we'll see what the total score is at the end, okay? So that's the table there. And again, you can deal with that in your own time, because we're going to be referring back to it frequently throughout the tasks anyway. We've also got this little bit that sort of says, okay, once we sort of take the total or the aggregate score, how do we define it? Very low, low, medium, high, or a very high risk, okay? So again, we're going to work out these different scores and then see ultimately where we end up. And then starting to be provided with a lot of information. You'll get a statement of profit and loss, you'll get a statement of financial position, you'll then be told which ratios to calculate, and you will then be sent on your way, okay? So again, I'm not going to run through every single line of this. You can see the figures on the screen, you can pause the video, and of course we will be referring back to the relevant figures when we need them. So I'm not going to run through all this line by line. Again, you're more than welcome to pause, just to familiarize yourself. But again, we'll take out the topics that we need to take out as we're making our way through, okay? And we're told, first of all, in part A, complete the table below by calculating the key indicators 2013 or X3 and X4 respectively, and rate the company using the scoring system. And we should do so to 2 decimal places. So again, this is all about ratios, calculating ratios and understanding them. Now, if you haven't already at this point, what I'd really, really recommend you do is go through your learning materials and make a note of the different ratios and have that as a reference for when you're studying. Ultimately, you will have to memorize them for the exam, but a good way to memorize them is to have them all written down on a really handy sheet of paper that you can just consistently refer to. So again, if you haven't done that at this stage, you may just wish to consider pausing the video and making notes of those ratios. Okay, it's the best way to get used to them. Now, plain and simply, we're told to start with the operating profit margin. Now, you can do this in different ways. You can sort of go across the rows, or you can go down the columns. Doesn't really matter. We're just going to do it across the rows, so we're not supposed to write the same formulas out twice. So we'll start with the operating profit margin, the 20x4. Now, the operating profit margin can be very easily defined as your operating profit divided by your revenue multiplied by 100. Plain and simply, for the first one, that is £790 divided by the revenue figure, 5,240, multiplied by 100, 15.08%. So in it goes. What I then can also choose to do is the rating. So the profit margin is 15%. I'm going to look at the rating really quickly. What is the bracket for the operating profit margin? Well, if it's between 10% and 20, so 10% and above, but less than 20, it gets a score of 10. So all I do, go down, add in the rating there. I'm not going to do the exact same thing for the previous year. Operating profit divided by the revenue multiplied by 100. Operating profit 988 divided by our revenue multiplied by 100, 20.42%. And if I'm using my credit scoring system again, I'm going to give it a score of 20 because it is 20% or more. And of course, we are 0.42% over that. Okay, I'm just going to clear this space. Now, again, obviously, this is a recording. You can always go back and look at the calculations. The bottom line is I have a lot of calculations to do and not a lot of space to do them in. Okay, so I will have to sort of clear the space. But of course, the beauty of the recording is if you need a quick reminder of the figures, you can just jump back a little bit. Now, the next ratio I'm asked to discuss is the interest cover. Now, interest cover can plain and simply be defined as our operating profits divided by our finance costs. So I'm going to go again to my statement of profit and loss. And I can see operating profit and my finance cost, just like that. 790 divided by 60. Divided by 160 gives me a total 2000 x4 of 4.94. And that goes. And again, I can now give that a credit rating by just referring to the chart for interest cover between 2 and 7. So 2 and above, but less than 7 gets a score of 0. So in it goes. Now do the exact same thing with the 20x3. Also scrolling up and down in these tasks, as you can probably imagine. Operating profit divided by my finance cost, 988 divided by 155. Gives me a total of 6.37. Now we've just seen that this will also get a score of 0 because it is below 7. So to save me scrolling up again, we can just put the 0 straight in, make it a little easier for ourselves. I'm then asked to deal with the current ratio. Now the current ratio, we can very simply define as our current assets divided by our current liabilities. Again, this is why it's important you write these formulas down when you've picked them out from your materials. You should have a sheet with all of these on. So you should know the current ratio is current assets divided by current liabilities. So all we're going to do is this time go to the statement of financial position. Can I find my current assets? Yes, I can. 1,595. Can I find my liabilities? Yes, I can. 970. There's payables and other payables added together. So simply 1,595 divided by 970. Let's do that. $1,595 divided by 970 gives us a total of 1.64. I can then assess the credit score from that by going to the current ratio section, and we can see that anything that is less than 2 gets a score of minus 25. So let's put that in. Exact same thing for the previous year now. Current assets divided by current liabilities. 1,465 divided by 900. That gives me a total of 1.63. So let's put it in, 1.63. And again, I know that it's also going to be minus 25 based on the scoring information that I have just seen. I'm now left with the gearing ratio. And the gearing ratio can be defined, I'll perhaps write this one down to be fair. It's a little more long-winded. Total debt divided by a figure that is your total debt plus equity. So again, I'm going to go to my statement of financial position and try and find this information. So first of all, I'm going to say, okay, where is the total debt? Well, the total debt is the amount that I borrow. So the total debt in terms of borrowing is £2,900. That is going to be divided by a figure that is my total debt plus equity. Now, again, I've already found the debt figure because it's there. So all I need to do now is also find the total equity figure. And that's it. Let's put that in. 2,900 divided by total debt plus total equity. So you've got to convert that into the relevant percentage. 38.11%. Let's put that in. And again, I can score that by going to the gearing section, and I can see that, okay, what are we dealing with? Well, anything between 20 but less than 40 is given a score of 10. So let's put that in. Do the exact same thing for the previous year now. I've got the total borrowings and I have the total equity. I've got all the figures I need. Total borrowings, total debt, 2,800 divided by a figure is my total debt plus my total equity. Convert it into a percentage, however you prefer. Gives me a grand total of 38.81%. Was that 37? Sorry, but I think it looks like 37, my mistake. That was the trick with calculators, isn't it? Okay, terrific. Let's put that in. Now, I'm just going to check that one quickly. I'm going to make sure I trust my calculators because they can always be a bit funny. I've got a little bit of a mix there. 2,800 plus 4605. The beauty of doing this live, isn't it? So give me 2 seconds. Just want to make sure we're getting this spot on. 2,800. All right, 245. Yeah, okay. I think it is actually 38. Just bear with me. We'll triple check that. Yeah, 37.81. There we go. Just double check. It's always worth doing. I think I have my calculator on different rounding settings for different units. So as I've written that out, I've gone, is it 37? Is it 38? It is 37. So we were right the first time, but there's no harm in double checking, is there? Now, this is going to fall into the same category that we just spoke about because it falls under that 40%. So it gives us a credit score of 10. Now, all I need to do is total these up. So in 2000 and X4, the total credit rating comes to -5. In 20X3, the total credit rating came to 5. Just add the figures up really quickly and do the maths. Now, I can now define these using this chart, can't I? Because it says based on like the aggregate score, which is just the total score, what can I define this as? So we've just said that 20x4 came to -5. Now, as I'm looking at this, okay, well, it says anything between 0 and 29, -29, beg your pardon, is defined as medium risk. So we can say that in this year, it's a medium risk. And in 20x3, we have a score of 5, which puts it in the bracket of low risk. Always just worth putting that in because we're going to have to deal with that, okay? Because in this next little section, there's, okay, like, depending on the returning results, should we accept or reject, or maybe say, actually, we can't make a proper decision, we need to investigate this further. So I'm basically looking for the one that says medium in the current year and a lower risk in the previous year. So the first one straight away is out the window because it says current year low. Anything with the current year very low, but it's not, is it? The current year is medium. Such as this one, current year medium, and the previous year very low, low or medium. That is what we are currently under, okay? Current year medium, yes. Previous year high or very high, not the case. Current year high or very high, not the case. So again, you're just looking for the one that fits the description. It's not hard, you're just sort of matching the words together. So based on the credit rating, the company's policy is to accept the application for credit. Terrific. Now, we're not done just yet. Plenty more to come. More ratios, a lot more that we need to deal with. So let's continue to pluck our way through this, okay? We're told that the sales department has asked for a credit limit of £20,000 to be given to Glass Limited, who is another potential new customer. The financial information has been supplied, same drill, nothing new. Here is the sales revenues and the profit and losses, statements of financial positions. Again, you can pause the screen if you want to memorize all these figures, but we're going to be taking out what we need anyway. And I'm plain and simply told, complete the table below by calculating some more indicators for 2018, 2017, or 2 or X8, X7. I always put the 17, 18. I've always done it that way, but yeah, X8, X7. Same again, we do it to 2 decimal places. So we start with the gross profit margin. Now the gross profit margin, we simply define it as the gross profit divided by revenue multiplied by 100. For example, gross profit divided by the revenue and multiplied by 100. I'm not great for space, am I? Gross profit divided by the revenue multiplied by 100 converted to a percentage. 43.75%. I'll do the exact same thing for the prior year. It doesn't matter which order you do the years, and I will mention that. I know I'm sort of doing this arguably backwards in terms of like chronological orders, but it doesn't matter. I just sort of do it in the orders they come on the columns as I make my way through. But it doesn't really matter. You can do the previous year first, you can do this year first, dealer's choice, okay? 1,675 divided by 3,600, put that in. Multiply by 100, 46.53%. Terrific. Now, operating profit margins, we've just dealt with these. It's literally the same thing, but we're going to swap gross profit for operating profit. Nice and easy. Easy marks to get in these tasks because it's just the profit figure that changes. We still divide it against the revenue. 550 for 2x8. divided by the 3,200 multiplied by 100, 17.19%. And same for the other year, 1,070 and 3,600. (29.72%). Terrific. Okay, let's clear the space. Again, you can always just go back and pause if you need to relook at those figures. I'm now going to deal with a ratio we haven't dealt with yet, but it's a pretty easy one. Trade payables, payment periods. So there can be receivables collections or payables payment periods. We simply define this one. Trade payables divided by your cost of sales times by 365. So all we need to do is find those figures. So I'm going to go down to the statement of financial position. Look at 1 year. What are my trade payables? 332. I then need to find out, okay, well, what was my cost of sales? 1,800, and simply multiply it by 365. 332 divided by the cost of sales times by 365 days. A total of 67.32. Do the exact same for the previous year. 196 for the payables, 1,925 for the cost of sales. 196 divided by 1,925 and by 365 gives me a grand total 37.16. Okay, inventory holding period. And the good thing with this is I can basically keep the formula that I've written here and just change it ever so slightly. The other thing that changes, instead of looking at payables, I'm simply going to look at my inventory level. Divided by cost of sales, times by 365. There's my inventory level. And I know what the cost of sales are for each year. So let's do the rest. Inventory for 20x8 divided by the cost of sales for that year times by 365 gives me a grand total of 60.83. The second year, exact same thing, 240 for inventories, 1,925 for cost of sales. So inventory divided by cost of sales times by 365. I'm stuck on repeat at this point. Keep saying the same things over and over, don't we? 45.51. Terrific. We're now left with the quick ratio and the current ratio. Now the quick ratio, sometimes known as the acid ratio for what it's worth, is simply defined as current assets minus your inventory, sorry, not current liabilities, getting ahead of myself there. So figure that is your current assets with the inventory taken out. Divided by your current liabilities. For example, what's the current asset figure? 851. We already have identified the inventory figure for 2008. So now what we'll need to do is work out what's the current liabilities, and there they are, 652. So really simply, a figure that is the current assets minus any inventory divided by the current liabilities. .85. We'll now do the exact same the second year. For the previous year, I should say, if I'm doing this sort of back to front a little bit. We've got the liability figure. I've got my current assets, and I've got the inventory. So it's going to be 563, take away the 240 inventory, divided by the 296 liabilities. Let's do that. Divided by the liabilities. 1.09. And the last one I'm expected to do is the current ratio. Now, the good thing with this is it's basically the exact same. The only difference is I don't remove inventory like in the quick or acid ratio. I just literally do current assets divided by current liabilities. So I can literally just very, very easily adjust the calculation, take the inventory out, and leave it looking like so. So for the first year, 851 divided by 652 gives me a total, as we do it in the right colour, 1.31. And again, the way we practice these questions, you'll be able to do it this quickly as well. 563 take away 296, 1.90. Just like so. So again, lots of different sort of practices that we've needed to do there, but that sort of leaves the ratio bit at this point. We've done a lot of calculation, but we'll need to also make sure we start to understand these. So let's take a look at part D. So we're told in part D to analyse the change in the performance indicators for glass between the 2 years. So again, this is where we now need to start. Okay, we've seen the figures, we've calculated them, but we need to know a little bit more about them as well, don't we? So that's exactly what we're going to do here. First of all, we're talking about profitability. The company appears to be something loss-making, profitable, or breaking even. Now, simply all I need to do is just look at the information. And when I look at the profit margins, they're not loss-making either because they've made profits in the first instance. And they're doing more than breaking even. They're profitable, aren't they? We can see that in both years. Look at the gross profit, look at the operating profit. We're then told that there are some concerns about the liquidity of glass. The revenue has decreased by what? 11%, 12%, 13%. Questions like this are just really, really nice and easy. You're just using your noggin, to be completely honest. Just find the revenue figure for each year. And just essentially work out the percentage difference between the two. So just divide it by the 3,600. Again, there's different ways of working out percentages, so whatever way you prefer to do it is fine, but ultimately, she'll get to the point where we can define it as 11%. I'm then told that between 20x7 and 20x8, this would indicate that the company has what? Either sold fewer units or decreased prices, reduced production to cut its costs, or sold profit generating assets. Now, when we look at 1 year between the other, we can see that the revenue is in fact falling, isn't it? We sort of go up and look at the information. We're trying to ascertain very clearly what's happened between 1 year and the other. The amount of revenue has fallen. Now, the only way that revenue can rise or fall is if we sell more or less. So if it's fallen, we sold less units. Again, this is just basic stuff. There's nothing overcomplicated here. And finally, it says the operating profit, the gross profit margin has decreased by what? 3, 5, or 7 percentage points. Now, we worked it out when we looked at the gross profit margin. It's gone down from 46, I beg your pardon, to 43. So it comes out at around like 2.7-ish on the top of my head, 2.78, I'm going to guess. But if we're looking at the closest percentage, it's 3 percentage points there, isn't it? Because it's not 5 and it's not 7. So it has to be 3. Now, what about the liquidity? So again, can we just keep talking about these different things? This is what we need to do. So for liquidity, we're saying that based on the current ratio and the quick ratio, the company has experienced what? Improving, steady, or deteriorating levels. Well, how do I find that out? Well, I can just refer back to my workings. When I look at the quick ratio and the current ratio, from 20x7 to 20x8, they have both fallen. It's gone down from 1.09 to 0.85 and gone down from 1.90 to 1.31. So the ratios are dropping, they are deteriorating. The inventory level has what? What do I need to do? Just go to the statement, look at the levels of inventory. It has gone up from 240 to 300. So the inventory level, easy marks again, has increased. This is what? Encouraging, as it indicates that Glass is taking advantages of bulk discounts. A worrying sign, as inventory holding should not change significantly. Normal, as inventory holding generally fluctuates significantly from year to year. Now, again, we just need to look at the information that we've got. Look at the indicators first of all. We're holding the inventory in stock for an extra 15 days. Now, that's not necessarily a good thing, is it? There's no references to say we're making sort of taking advantages of any bulk discount. And that's not being seen in sort of any measures in terms of profitability. It's not being taken really in any measures at all when you look at the cost of sales as well. So a very, very moderate drop. But again, we've sold less. So we've sold less, so obviously the cost of sales is probably going to be proportionately smaller as well. There's nothing to say that actually we're getting any sort of bulk discounts. This is an issue. Inventory should remain moderately consistent. So it's a concerning sign. Okay, again, there's nothing to say there's a bulk discount going. I can't see that reflected in the profitability, and it's not normal. We don't want these figures to fluctuate heavily. Last but not least, the trade payables payment period has what? Increased by 30 days, decreased by 30 days, increased by 76. You literally just look at your figures. It's gone up from 37 to 67. No prizes for that. It's increased by 30 days. That in itself is an issue, isn't it? Because the longer this goes on for us, and the longer it takes us to pay our suppliers, it can be arguably more beneficial from a cash flow perspective, but it can do more damage in terms of like souring supplier relations. Again, if I am looking to give custom to these individuals or they're looking to buy from me, it's not a good sign, is it, that that's such a massive deterioration. So as a result, it appears the company is what? Company may have insufficient liquidity to pay its bills. It has sufficient liquidity. It has sufficient liquidity, but may not pay the bills and will soon be in receivership. Now, when we're looking at these, again, I'm using common sense. It doesn't look like it can pay the bills when it falls due. Again, we're looking at falling ratios. When you look at the ratios from 1 year to the other, essentially everything's deteriorating there, isn't it? The gross profit margin has fallen, the operating profit margin has fallen, The amount of time it takes to pay suppliers has gone up, the amount of inventory in stock has increased, the quick ratio and the current ratio, everything has deteriorated. So that would imply that there's going to be issues with this company paying the bills. So I'd say that actually there is insufficient liquidity to pay the bills as they fall due. And finally, would we give them credit? Well, again, I'd look at this and say literally everything looks to be worse. I'm not going to give them credit. And that's it. That is a full work through of task 2. Lots of different things to deal with, all computer marked again. Lots of calculations and lots of good marks to pick up here as well. If you can just get into the habit of practicing them, that's the key to these. And people always ask, how do I get better at like remembering the ratios, which ones it is? You just practice them again and again and again, and it becomes like muscle memory. But that actually sort of brings us to the end of this revision session where we looked at task 2. Hope that you will join us for the next one where, spoiler alert, we'll be taking a look at task 3.